Hello, my dear brothers and sisters in Christ. This is Shiny with Jesus Bytes, welcoming you back on our journey exploring the Bible. We will continue with the Old Testament, the second book of Exodus, covering chapters 16 through 21. Manna and Quail provided, chapter 16. The entire Israelite community departed from Elim and came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. On the 15th day of the second month after they had left the land of Egypt, the entire Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat and ate all the bread we wanted. Instead, you brought us into this wilderness to make this whole assembly die of hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I am going to rain bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. This way I will test them to see whether or not they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather on other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "This evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. In the morning you will see the Lord's glory, because he has heard your complaints about him. For who are we that you complain about us?" Moses continued, "The Lord will give you meat to eat this evening, and abundant bread in the morning. For he has heard the complaints that you are raising against him. Who are we? Your complaints are not against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your complaints.'" As Aaron was speaking to the entire Israelite community, they turned towards the wilderness, and there in a cloud the Lord's glory appeared. The Lord spoke to Moses, "I have heard the complaints of the Israelites. Tell them at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will eat bread until you are full. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." So at evening quail came down and covered the camp. In the morning there was a layer of dew evaporated. There on the desert surface were fine flakes, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they asked one another, "What is it?" because they didn't know what it was. Moses told them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much as each person needs to eat. You may take 2 quarts per individual, according to the number of people each of you has in the tent." So the Israelites did this. Some gathered a lot, some a little. When they measured it by quarts, the person who gathered a lot had no surplus, and the person who had gathered a little had no shortage. Each gathered as much as he needed to eat. Moses said to them, No one is to let any of it remain until morning. But they didn't listen to Moses. Some people left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and smelled. Therefore Moses was angry with them. They gathered it every morning. Each gathered as much as they needed to eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. On the 6th day, they gathered twice as much food, 4 quarts apiece, and all the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He told them, "This is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake, and boil what you want to boil, and everything left over set aside to be kept until morning." So they set it aside until morning as Moses commanded, and it didn't smell or have any maggots in it. "Eat it today," Moses said, "because today is Sabbath to the Lord. Today you won't find any in the field. For 6 days you may gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will be none." Yet on the 7th day, some of the people went out to gather, but they did not find anything. Then the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commands and instructions? Understand that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore on the 6th day, He will give you 2 days' worth of bread. Each of you stay where you are. No one is to leave his place on the 7th day." So the people rested on the 7th day. The house of Israel named the substance Manna. It resembled coriander seed, was white, and tasted like wafers made with honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. 2 quarts of it are to be preserved throughout your generations, so that they may see the bread I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt." Moses told Aaron, "Take a container and put 2 quarts of manna in it. Then place it before the Lord to be preserved throughout your generations." As the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron placed it before the testimony to be preserved. The Israelites ate manna for 40 years, until they came to an inhabited land. They ate manna until they reached the border of the land of Canaan. 2 quarts are a tenth of ephah. Water from the rock. Chapter 17. The entire Israelite community left the wilderness of sin, moving from one place to the next according to the Lord's command. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So the people complained to Moses, "Give us water to drink." "Why are you complaining to me?" Moses replied to them, "Why are you testing the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water and grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you ever bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What should I do with these people? In a little while they will stone me." The Lord answered Moses, "Go on ahead of the people and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take the rod you struck the Nile with in your hand and go. I am going to stand there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. When you hit the rock, water will come out of it, and the people will drink." Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. He named the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites complained, and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" The Amalekites attack. At Rephidim, Amalek came and fought against Israel. Moses said to Joshua, "Select some of men for us, and go fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the hilltop with God's staff in my hand." Joshua did as Moses had told him, and fought against Amalek. While Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill, while Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. But whenever he put his hand down, Amalek prevailed. When Moses' hand grew weary, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat down. Then Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and the other on the other, so that his hands remained steady until the sun went down. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his army with a sword. The Lord said to Moses, "Write this down on a scroll as a reminder and recite it to Joshua. I will completely blot out the memory of Amalek under heaven." And Moses built an altar and named it, "The Lord is my banner." He said, "Indeed, my hand is lifted up toward the Lord. The Lord will be at war with Amalek from generation to generation." Jethro's visit, chapter 18. Moses' father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, heard about everything that God had done for Moses and his people Israel, and how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Now Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had taken in Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back, along with her 2 sons, one of whom was named Gershom, because Moses had said, "I have been a stranger in a foreign land," and the other Eleazar, because he had said, "The God of my father was my helper and delivered me from Pharaoh's sword." Moses' father-in-law Jethro, along with Moses' wife and sons, came to him in the wilderness, where he had camped at the mountain of God. He sent word to Moses, "I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her sons." So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, bowed down, and then kissed him, then asked each other how they had been, and went into the tent. Moses recounted his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardships that they had confronted on the way, and how the Lord delivered them. Jethro rejoiced over all the good things the Lord had done for Israel, and when he rescued them from the Egyptians. "Blessed is the Lord," Jethro exclaimed, "who rescued you from Pharaoh and the power of the Egyptians, and snatched the people from the power of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because he did wonders at the time the Egyptians acted arrogantly against Israel." Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought burnt offering and sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses, his father-in-law, in God's presence. The next day Moses sat down to judge people, and they stood around Moses from morning until evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw everything he was doing for them, he asked, What is this thing you're doing for the people? Why are you alone sitting as judge, while all the people stand around you from morning until evening?" Moses replied to his father-in-law, "Because the people came to me to inquire of God. Whenever they have a dispute, it comes to me, and I make a decision between one man and another. I teach them God's statutes and laws." "What you're doing is not good, Moses," father-in-law said to him. "You will certainly wear out both yourself and these people who are with you, because the task is too heavy for you. You can't do it alone. Now listen to me. I will be one to represent the people before God and bring their cases to Him. Instruct them about the statutes and laws, and teach them the way to live and what they must do. But you should select from all the people able men, God-fearing, trustworthy, and hating bribes. Place them over the people as officials of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They should judge the people at all times. Then they can bring you every important case, but judge every minor case themselves. In this way, you will lighten your load, and they will bear it with you. If you do this, and God so directs you, you will be able to endure, and also all these people will be able to go home satisfied." Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. So Moses chose able men from all Israel and made them leaders over the people as officials of thousands, hundreds, and tens. Then they judged the people at all times. The hard cases they would bring to Moses, but every minor case they would judge themselves. Then Moses said goodbye to his father-in-law, and he journeyed to his own land. Israel at Sinai. In the 3rd month, on the same day of the month that the Israelites had left the land of Egypt, they entered the wilderness of Sinai. After they departed from Rephidim, they entered the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness, and Israel camped there in front of the mountain. Moses went up to mountain to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, "This is what you must do to the house of Jacob, and explain to the Israelites, you have seen what I have done to the Egyptians, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. Now if you will listen to me and carefully keep my covenant, you will be my own possession out of all the peoples. Although all the earth is mine, and you will be my kingdom of priests and my holy nation." These are the words that you are to say to the Israelites. After Moses came back, he summoned the elders to the people and put before them all these words that the Lord had commanded him. Then all the people responded together, "We will do all the Lord has spoken." So Moses brought the people's words back to the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, "I am going to come to you in a dense cloud, so that the people will hear when I speak with you and will always believe you." Then Moses reported the people's words to the Lord, and the Lord told Moses, "Go to the people and purify them today and tomorrow. They must wash their clothes and be prepared for the 3rd day. For on the 3rd day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. Put boundaries for the people around the mountain and say, Be careful that you don't go up to the mountain or touch its base. Anyone who touches the mountain will be put to death. No hand may touch him. Instead, he will be stoned or shot with arrows. Neither animal or man will live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, they may go up the mountain. Then Moses came down from the mountain to the people and consecrated them, and they washed their clothes. He said to the people, "Be prepared by the third day. Do not have sexual relationships with women." On the third day, when the morning came, there was thunder and lightning, a thick cloud on the mountain, and a loud trumpet sound, so that all the people in the camp shuddered. Then Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was completely enveloped in smoke because the Lord came down on it in fire. Its smoke went up like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain shook violently. As the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and the Lord answered him in the thunder. The Lord came down to the Mount Sinai at the top of the mountain. Then the Lord summoned Moses to the top of the mountain, and he went up. The Lord directed Moses, "Go down and warn the people not to break to see the Lord. Otherwise, many of them will die. Even the priests who come near the Lord must purify themselves, or the Lord will break out in anger against them." But Moses responded to the Lord, "The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, since you warned us. Put a boundary around the mountain and consider it holy." And the Lord replied to him, "Go down and come back with Aaron. But the priests and the people must not break through to come up to the Lord, or he will break out in anger against them." So Moses went down to the people and told them. The 10 Commandments, Chapter 20. Then God spoke all these words, "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Do not have other gods beside me. Do not make an idol for yourself, whether in the shape of anything in the heavens above, or on earth below, or in the waters underneath the earth. You must not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the father's sins, to the third and the fourth generations of those who hate me, by showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. Do not misuse the name of the Lord your God, because the Lord will punish anyone who misuses his name. Remember to dedicate the Sabbath day. You are to labor 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You must not do any work, you, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the foreigner who is within your gates. For the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything in them in 6 days. Then he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and declared it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may have a long life in the land that the Lord God is giving you. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not give false testimony against your neighbor. Do not covet your neighbor's house. Do not covet your neighbor's wife, his male or female slave, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. The people's reaction. All the people witnessed the thunder and lightning, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountains surrounded by smoke. When the people saw it, they trembled and stood at a distance. "You speak to us, and we will listen," they said to Moses. "But don't let God speak to us, or we will die." Moses responded to the people, "Don't be afraid, for God has come to test you, so that you will fear him and will not sin." And the people remained standing at a distance as Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. Moses receives additional laws. Then the Lord told Moses, "This is what you are to say to the Israelites. You have seen that I have spoken to you from heaven. You must not make gods of silver or rival me. You must not make gods of gold for yourselves. You must make an earthen altar for me and sacrifice on it burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your sheep and goats, as well as your cattle. I will come to you and bless you in every place where I cause my name to be remembered. If you make a stone altar for me, you must not build it out of cut stones. If you use chisel on it, you will defile it. You must not go up to my altar on steps, so that your nakedness is not exposed on it. These are the ordinances that you must set before them." Chapter 21. Laws about slaves. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he is to serve for 6 years. Then in the 7th, he is to leave as a free man without paying anything. If he arrives alone, he is to leave alone. If he arrives with a wife, his wife is to leave with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children belong to her master, and the man must leave alone. But if the slave declares, "I love my master, my wife, and my children. I do not want to leave as a free man," his master is to bring him to the judge, and they bring him to the door or doorpost. His master must pierce his ears with an awl, and he will serve his master for life. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she is not to leave as the male slaves do. If she is displeasing to her master, who chose her for himself, then he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners because he has acted treacherously toward her. Or if he chooses her for his son, he must deal with her according to the customary treatment of daughters. If he takes an additional wife, he must not reduce the food, clothing, or material rights of the first wife. And if he does not do these three things for her, she may leave free of charge, without any exchange of money. Laws about personal injury. Whoever strikes a person so that he dies must be put to death. But if he didn't intend any harm, and yet God caused it to happen by his hand, I will appoint a place for you where he may flee. If a person willfully acts against his neighbor to murder him by scheming, you must take him from my altar to be put to death. Whoever strikes his father or his mother must be put to death. Whoever kidnaps a person must be put to death. Whether he sells him or the person is found in his possession. Whoever curses his father or his mother must be put to death. When men quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or fist, and the injured man does not die, but is confined to bed, if he can later get up and walk outside leaning on his staff, then the one who struck him will be exempt from punishment. Nevertheless, he must pay for his lost work time and provide for his complete recovery. When a man strikes his female or male slave with a rod, and the slave dies under his abuse, the owner must be punished. However, if the slave can stand up after a day or two, the owner should not be punished, because he is his owner's property. When men get in a fight and hit a pregnant woman so that her children are born prematurely, but there is no injury, the one who hit her must be fined as the woman's husband demands from him. He must pay according to judicial assessment. If there is an injury, then you must give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, bruise for bruise, wound for wound. When a man strikes the eye of his male or female slave and destroys it, he must let the slave go free in compensation for his eye. If he knocks out the tooth of his male or female slave, he must let the slave go free in compensation for his tooth. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox must be stoned, and its meat may not be eaten, but the ox's owner is innocent. However, if the ox was in the habit of goring, and its owner had been warned, yet does not restrain it, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox must be stoned, and its owner must also be put to death. If instead a ransom is demanded of him, he can pay a redemption price for his life in the full amount demanded from him. If it gores a son or a daughter, he is to be dealt with according to the same law. If the ox gores a male or female slave, he must give 30 shekels of silver to the slave's master, and the ox must be stoned. When a man uncovers a pit or digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit must give compensation. He must pay to its owner, but the dead animal will become his. When a man's ox injures his neighbor's ox when it dies, they must sell the live ox and divide its proceeds. They must also divide the dead animal. If, however, it is known that the ox was in the habit of goring, yet its owner had not restrained it, he must compensate fully. Ox for ox, the dead animal will become his. The word of the Lord. Have a blessed day. Ciao.